So, yeah, I'd like to remind you guys, if you have any questions for these guys, do go and find them afterwards. They're not going to bite, and you may get a more intimate answer. For our next panel, there's actually going to be 4 panelists plus the moderator. So I am going to ask the panelists to, 3 of you are going to have to get comfortable on this couch. So yeah, without further ado, I would like to welcome them to the stage. So please give a round of applause. Oh.
Should we put all 4?
Yeah, you go all 4.
Let's do it. Nice and cozy.
Best factor here is
the couch factor.
How to get rid of.
So
Very quick. This is like the staking community. We're very close knit.
good morning, and thank you for being so comfortable with each other. My name is Pascal. I'm one of the people organizing the local developer meetup. You can find all about it at ethereum.nl. But I'm now here to introduce you to this amazing panel. We have from left to right, I'll just introduce them with first name, Nikhil, Pol, Pablo, and Izzy. You know the drill. You can ask questions on Slido 323232. But first, I'm going to ask each of the panelists, who are you? What's the project you're working for, and what do you have to offer? And try to do that in one longish tweet.
Perfect. Happy to kick it off. Thanks, everybody, for coming and listening to us. I'm Nikhil from Figment. We provide infrastructure for staking, effectively token holders who don't want to run their own infrastructure but earn staking rewards. We run infrastructure on their behalf.
Hey there. My name is Pol Lanski, and I'm representing Dappnode, which is free open source software that you can use and install in your computer to run whatever Web3 infrastructure you want without ever having to touch command line. So we have this beautiful UI that you say, hey, I want to run a validator, click, click, click. You deploy everything in your own machine. Self-sovereignty is super important, decentralization. And then you can start staking. And one of the things that we're doing is we're integrating with all these guys here. So not only you can run a solo staker, but also you can participate and offer decentralized infrastructure for all of the LSD protocols out there.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm Pablo Villalba from Diva. So Diva is a liquid staking protocol. What we are doing a bit different is that we see DBT as a kind of technological revolution for staking. We're building a protocol that's both completely permissionless, anybody can join, can be an operator, can use it, but also completely trustless. We removed all the sources of upgradability, of attacks that you could have. We consolidated all that into a single solution where you can either stake or operate a node. And yeah, I've been involved with a lot of the research and the foundational decisions for the protocol.
Hey everyone, I'm Izzy. I'm a contributor to Lido as the master of validators. Lido is basically a liquid staking protocol headquartered on Ethereum, but also active on Polygon, Solana, Polkadot, and Kusama, although the latter are being deprecated and phased out right now. And Lido is all about providing democratized access to staking, basically. So making staking as approachable as possible, as simple as possible, accessible, and composable.
So we noticed that your offerings are complementary. Maybe to make that even more clear, could you describe your target user? You can also say the same as the guy on the right or the left, but it's probably good that you paint a picture of your typical user. And maybe let's start from right to left now.
Sure. So I guess one of the core principles of Lido is that anybody can be a target user when you're thinking about it from a staker perspective. So one of the first remits of the protocol was to make staking approachable for people with less than 32 ETH. And from the other perspective, obviously, when you're not talking about stakers, you're talking about node operators. Up until now, Lido has been a permission protocol in that node operators are curated by the DAO. With the advent of Lido VT, which introduced the staking router, modules will be able to be added to Lido, which will basically plug in validator sets and allow a wide swath of different node operators, independent people, solo people, DAOs, communities to band together and also participate in the network.
So thank you for that distinction. So user is both the validator on the one side and then the user, in your case, of the liquid token on the other side. And one is more business and the other more is retail user.
It could even be the same, right? You might have somebody that is like staking but also wants to operate validators at the same time. So there's definitely also an overlap. Or it might be other DAOs or communities that want to band together to pool their funds, to run validators together or to stake together and then be able to do things with those pooled funds.
Pablo, if they're targeting everyone, who specifically are you targeting with Diva?
So we see users as a sliding scale of involvement. So Lido was an inspiration for us in the sense that we want everybody to be able to participate on staking. What we do is we make it really seamless that you can be a staker, but then you can use that as a collateral to run an operator. And we remove the barrier to entry, so we don't start at 32 ETH, but we're actually starting at half an ETH bond. We made this decision by thinking it should be the price of an iPhone. Like if you have a good iPhone or if you have a laptop, you should be able to run a node. And today you have the technology, but what we're doing is we're creating the economic model for that. And that was not easy, because today most of the DVT has been thought as, oh, we're just going to split the key. But it doesn't answer questions like how do we attribute rewards to people doing a good job, or how do we penalize the people who are doing a bad job? And I think we cater both stakers and operators, but I think the innovation for Diva is that the economics are very deeply integrated, so they make that very attractive.
Pol?
Well, I mean, we also want to target everyone. What do you mean? No, I'm joking. Ideally, we target people that want to run infrastructure, that want to participate and take one more step into the centralizing Ethereum, Gnosis chain, any proof-of-stake chain that exists now and that might exist in the future. We target people that consider decentralization something crucial, something important, and we target both people that are technical and especially people that are not technical. So if you want to start participating, getting rewards on Ethereum staking or Gnosis chain staking, and you feel that your technical level might not be, maybe you've never installed Linux before, maybe you've never used command line before, maybe you're worried about upgrades and how am I going to upgrade. We take care of all of this. So basically our target user is a node operator that wants to have something super easy. And up until now, we're targeting solo stakers. But now we're going to start targeting any LSD, and anyone who wants to be an LSD operator. And we're lowering the barrier of entry, the economic barrier of entry to staking by offering protocols like Diva, like Lido V2, like Stakehouse, like Rocket Pool, protocols that are deeply integrated on how Dappnode works. You can just deploy them in one click, and they require a lot less than 32 ETH to run a node.
Let me drill down there. So you try to make it as easy as possible for people to stake at home, to run their own machine. What do you think works best? Do you try to convince them on ideological level, or are you more able to convince them on a financial level?
I think we don't need to choose. I think we can offer to both. It makes sense to run a node. It makes sense to validate and stake on Ethereum for yourself, especially because with tools like Dappnode, you don't even need to dedicate time to maintaining this. We have auto updates, we take care of all the DevOps, we take care of all the testing new versions before they get pushed to the smart contract. By the way, the auto updates are decentralized. Everything is put in a repository and distributed via IPFS, so we don't have a central server. That's a single point of failure, et cetera, et cetera. So basically, it makes sense for people that consider decentralization important. It makes sense for Ethereum as a protocol to have more solo stakers. So definitely there's an ideological part of here. But there's also a lot of money to be made. People mined Bitcoin in order to make money. And that's a totally legit way to go and stake Ethereum because you want to make money. And I think we can target both.
And Nikhil, I would think that you're on the other side of the spectrum. Could you tell me a bit more about your type of customers?
Yeah,
You work with?
that's spot on. So it's a good contrast. So we are on the other end of the spectrum, where we're typically offering our services to institutional holders of tokens. So folks that are typically holding large amounts of tokens, they may be running their own infrastructure and sort of use us in parallel, so that again, if you have a large holding, you want it to be distributed. Or it could be folks that have large holdings but don't want to run this infrastructure. So that's our target group. I would say it varies a bit. So it's directly folks who are token holders who are customers, as well as folks who want to offer staking to their end customer. So if you think of a custodian or an exchange, we would be behind the scenes running their infrastructure to offer staking. So that's our group. I'd say it's global. The things that are important to them are sort of having a large team. We are SOC 2 compliant. We're very focused on regulation. So it's sort of, the audience is people who are interested in those topics, as well as having the ability to stake.
There's one more thing that I wanted to double click on with Nikhil and Izzy. It's surprising to me. So there was recently this podcast with Laura Shin, and there's always this word custodial that we use. So either you have control over your keys and then you have your ether, or you don't have control of your keys and you don't have your ether. And we talk about custodial when we send ether crypto to an exchange. You guys are not custodial. You guys cannot run away with your customers' money. Can you explain how?
Yeah.
Because some people actually think that you can run away with your customers' money.
Yeah, that's really a great point. And the terminology we use is protocol staking, right? Because staking can get banded together with other activities in DeFi, like lending, yield farming. So we are trying to push this terminology that this is protocol staking. You control your keys. You never give up custody of your assets. It is you, the token holder, and the protocol that is interacting. And we're just sort of facilitating that. And the protocol is determining the staking rewards. You are determining how much you stake, and there's sort of no intermediary. And I think that's one of the reasons we are sort of very excited about it, because if you think about what's happening from a regulatory standpoint, and as well as some of the negative events that have happened in the last 12 months, they've all been related to people taking custody of someone's assets and doing things that they were sort of not supposed to be doing. So in light of those, we feel protocol staking is like a bright spot in the ecosystem.
Yeah, I think that's correct. And maybe to add a bit of technical nuance here, which is perhaps something that contributes towards this confusion. So when we talk about private keys, there's different forms of private keys. I mean, obviously, like a lot of different forms, especially on different chains. But even in terms of like when you're thinking about staking on Ethereum. So when you stake on Ethereum, you have your ether, which is controlled by the private keys, which control the address, which is yours on the network. But there are also the private keys of the validator. These are two different things. So when we are talking about non-custodial or custodial protocols, we are talking about two different forms of custody. The form of custody around the tokens themselves, so the ether that gets deposited into either a protocol or a centralized exchange or some other form of liquid staking solution, and the custody of the validator keys themselves. The design of Ethereum staking is such that custodying only the validator keys does not allow the node operator or whomever is running the validator or somebody that controls the validator keys to run away with the money that has been deposited to that validator. The only thing that allows them to do potentially, and DVT is something that really kind of meters this risk, is to get those funds slashed. So there's like the potential risk, let's say, of a hostage situation. So liquid staking protocols, and especially decentralized and non-custodial ones, do a couple of things to meter this risk. So the first is that the software itself, what runs on chain, i.e. the protocol middleware, is non-custodial in the sense that when funds leave a user's address, they get deposited into a smart contract. That smart contract can either be immutable, or if it's upgradable by something like a DAO. So we never say that if we are depositing our funds into like Aave, and Aave is a DAO, and there's a contract that's upgradable, that it's custodied. However, if you deposit it first to a SEX, and in the case of the centralized exchange, they actually take the money and then stake it, that is a custodied model. There may also be custodied models that are on-chain in terms of there's an extra step on-chain where the funds first need to hop before they end up on the beacon chain. But liquid staking protocols obviate that step and disintermediate it because it only happens based on code. And the second thing, with regards to validator keys, each different liquid staking protocol has different models around how validator keys are custodied. But the custody of those validator keys does not transfer into custody or the ability to rug users of their ETH.
The guys in the middle, so the guys next to you say, everything is fine, everything is under control. How are you holier than them? And I'm actually mostly asking Pablo, because in your case, running your own machine, that's pretty straightforward. But how do you refine the trust assumptions that they have? And I heard the word DVT. Yeah. It seems like they're stealing your thunder.
Yeah. Well, Lido existed, so we needed to make something better than that. So we started looking at all the trust assumptions were there, and we basically worked really hard to remove as many of them as we could. So, for example, the risk of, if you own a validator key, you can misbehave, you can disappear. With today's specs, it could be that you stop validating, and your ETH is locked for up to 10 years, and only then you get it to the withdrawal address, and only half of that. So that is, in my opinion, a validator custodial key risk that we're trying to solve. And what we do is we try to go back to the principles of how a blockchain should be. It should be that in a blockchain, if somebody's sleeping, nothing happens. Everything should continue, right? So what we did is we kind of thought, what if we redesign validation as a layer 2? And what principles will we have? Should we allow anybody to custody the key? Well, what we did is there's no key. It doesn't exist. It's always a multi-party computation thing. And if you use something like Fireblocks, for example, the key never exists in one case. It's distributed, is generated in a distributed way with DKG. So that's a really strong advantage because it means now you can reach consensus on what should be signed. And what we do is we use a 2 out of 3 consensus, which means that only 11 out of 16 nodes need to be online. And my model is this is like an office where people can be constantly sick. And as long as no more than 30% of people are sick any given day, the office keeps working. And I'm sure you've been to offices like this. But what we did the numbers, and it's pretty incredible because if you only have 95% uptime, which is terrible, the worst sets have 98% on Ethereum. DVT with these params turns 95% uptime into 99.99% uptime. And the other key of, so clearly DVT can allow home stakers to do a much better job actually than professional validators just because of this reliability aspect. And the second aspect is we try to avoid immutability. So if you're a router, even if for a split second your smart contract needs to route something, now if you have a governance takeover and the DAO, which could be you by the way, says now we're doing this and we're going to rug all users, you could technically do that. So we've gone for more immutable solutions, which I think we're all working towards, right? It's just safer and more akin to what blockchain stands for.
Pol, I had a follow-up question for you. So you guys, you built a software stack, and you're kind of a kingmaker because you can present the user with the choices that you deem the most holy, almost. How do you select the software that you incorporate in Dappnode?
We don't. The Dappnode smart contracts are publicly accessible, and anybody can use the SDK to publish their packages. And as I said, we have this sort of a Dapp store, right? We have this Dapp store, and you can make a package of whatever protocol, whatever node, whatever thing you want the users to run, the rocket pool, smart stack, the execution layer, the consensus layer. If you can Dockerize it, with our SDK, you can turn it into a Dappnode package. And then you can publish this into the smart contract. And then every Dappnode user can go into the Dapp store and will see that package. Now, danger. Anybody can make a malicious package and can introduce and inject code that will take keys away. And we have seen, because they have explained very properly, that the only thing that you can do with validator keys, which is the only thing that is in the Dappnode machine, is you can cause slashing, you can cause havoc. You can do a griefing attack, but you can't really steal, so there's really not much point in it. But still, we need to sort of gatekeep whatever comes into the official Dapp store. We have a public Dapp store where anybody can publish things, and then we have like a nicer way of presenting this. And the only thing that you need to do is to contact us, make your code open source, and then you're in the main Dapp store. Now, you've mentioned Kingmaker, and I want to say that for us, because of who we are and from the beginning, one of our design principles is optionality. We are actively trying to not be kingmakers, to always offer the users the possibility of using whatever software, whatever protocol they want. And of course, there's an order. If we need to integrate it, it might take longer time to put one on the Dapp store than another. But it's open source. You have an SDK. How about you create the package if you want your software to be there faster? That's the advantage of an open ecosystem that's open source.
Thank you. I saw two questions coming from the audience. We still have some time. I first want to throw something to you. There's been a lot of discussion about staking the past few months, issues around MEV, issues around security of protocols, protocols being attacked, issues around centralization. What keeps you awake at night? So what is your staking dystopia? So where can it terribly go wrong? And let me go from your left to right.
Yeah, from our perspective, what concerns us is regulatory overreach. If you think about what happened with Kraken and SEC, that if you peel back the onion, it was actually logical, the action that they took. But there's sort of, at least in the US, this element of going after everything crypto related. So our fear is some sort of regulatory action that just pushes staking offshore from the US, which I would say net is not good for the ecosystem, right? That's a pretty big market, a lot of interest. So to be honest, especially in light of the recent protocol upgrade, Chapella and prior, from a protocol and technological perspective, we actually feel very good. Like, I think the community is really delivered and established itself. It's really the regulators now, we feel like, need to understand what's happening and come on board and not sort of throw roadblocks on the way.
Why are you different from Kraken?
So if you think about Kraken, and if you've staked on Kraken, you are depositing your tokens onto Kraken, right? So similar to Izzy's example, you're giving up custody of your asset. That's one. Second, you're not interacting directly with the protocol. It's sort of Kraken is the intermediary. So for example, if the reward rate on a protocol is 10%, Kraken may be giving you 8% and keeping 2%. So your interaction is through an intermediary. Versus sort of, I think all of us on this panel, what we're offering is direct interaction with the protocol. And that's what the regulators took issue with. That one, it's custodial, you're giving up custody. Two, sort of, it's effectively a security. If Kraken is determining what reward the user's receiving, they're effectively offering a security.
There was actually a question from the audience. So what are the risks for stakers, regulatory risks? It's unclear to me if you mean staking provider or individual user, but let me throw that to you guys. So Nikhil, you're pretty optimistic with the way you organize now. You're clear. Let's suppose we're not in the clear yet. How can some of you guys make sure that we continue the Ethereum blockchain? We can keep the Ethereum blockchain running.
Yeah, I think the best way of doing this is making sure that we don't put a target on our foreheads. And meaning if they do come after big companies, if they do come after Figment, after staking providers, after those are companies that have a name, and therefore you can enforce action over them. If you have solo stakers or people running on their own homes in different countries, different jurisdictions, in different places, it becomes really, really hard to follow these people and force them to shut down their machine because you don't know who they are. You don't know whether I have a validator or not. You don't know if my validator is in the Philippines or in Spain or in Turkey or in Costa Rica. And it becomes really, really hard. And so for Ethereum, the best thing is to have solo stakers, to have people running the centralized hardware in their own homes. But it's not only good for Ethereum, it's also good for protocols as well. It's also good for Lido, it's also good for Diva, it's also good for all of these protocols who can have these node operators being equally distributed.
Maybe easy, I'm sure you'll agree, Pablo, or maybe something more spicy to add. No, okay. Easy. Is this an issue that comes up within the Lido DAO? I mean, do you guys aim to be geographically distributed?
Sure. Yeah, that's a really good question. So when we think about like what makes a good protocol and what makes a good validator set, we don't, and when I say we, I don't like necessarily mean contributors to Lido. I think we mean Ethereum as a whole. We're not only looking at things like performance and rewards, we mean robustness of the network, right? That it can withstand liveness issues, non-finality, people like regulatory capture in certain cases. So the only way to really have a robust network is to have it be decentralized. Decentralization means a lot of different things. It means having a lot of participants, independent participants. It means them being well distributed geographically, like you're saying, jurisdictionally, in terms of infrastructure, so not everybody running the same setup or the same client. And also in terms of not using the same type of infrastructure provider. So not everybody running on the public cloud, not everybody running in the same data center in Germany if there's like a thunderstorm, like it goes out. And probably not everyone running even like the same chipset architecture on their home staker PCs. So Lido has, like the DAO has enshrined a couple of principles with regards to this. Obviously one is the constant increase of the validator set, and V2 and the staking router is like the evolution of that to include as many independent node operators as possible, whether they're like solo stakers or larger groups. And the second aspect of that is for the permission set, like what is actually done and what kind of priorities are placed. So there is reporting that's done every quarter that reports on like how are node operators distributed geographically, how much stake is allocated to every node operator. Because for example, in a permissionless node operator set, you can't guarantee that there isn't a very top-heavy allocation of stake. In a curated set, what you can do is create staking algorithms that distribute stake in a more equitable manner, which means that you have more robustness in the case of something like regulatory capture. You see that node operators are constantly improving in terms of client diversity, running all the different clients. Lido is one of the first liquid staking protocols to no longer have a Prism supermajority, and is actually one of the protocols through its node operators, right, that is contributing the most to certain minority, both from the execution layer and the client layer, like statistics. So there's ChainSafe, which is the creator of Lodestar, which is running currently around 6,000 validators using Lodestar, an Ethereum client written in TypeScript, which is like an incredible feat just by itself. And that's something that has been enabled through their participation in the Lido ecosystem.
Yes. We continue the nightmare theme. So Nikhil's nightmare was regulation. What's your nightmare? What's your dystopia?
Good question. Yeah, so I think what Isi is saying is diversification is super important, right? Because the moment you diversify, you're making sure that there's never a majority risk of like US or Prism, and that's super important, right? But I think when we only think about that, we're still taking a damage, and we're just saying we're going to reduce that damage the way our portfolio manager reduces bad investment risk, right? Like, oh, I can lose this company because it's only 3% of my portfolio. But I think the unique advantage of what we're doing with DVT is that because we have a consensus, now this consensus can be made of diverse people. And because just in the same way that I showed how DVT could improve uptime from 95% with the same operator set to 99.99%, what we allow is because this consensus needs to agree, that means that we can probably improve, reduce the risk on attacks like this by 500 to 1,000 times. And again, we're always saying validator key doesn't mean you can steal the keys, but you are the property manager and you can ruin a lot of things. And maybe you get mandated. Like imagine ETH or staking becomes illegal the way heroin is illegal. Well, what do you do if you seize a validator? You have to burn it. And I think that's my nightmare scenario. Hopefully we never get there, but we're designing for that dark future in case we ever have to.
Maybe just to add a little bit to what Pablo was saying. So like my nightmare scenario here is that the technical environment doesn't do the things that it needs to do to allow liquid staking protocols to ossify as fast as possible in order to prevent this nightmare scenario. So DVT and creating a validation layer in terms of a layer 2 on top of the protocol is one way to solve this, and we should have more than one way. So another way is triggerable exits, right? Which is something that we saw a recent EIP about. My fear is that this stuff doesn't come fast enough so that we can say that liquid staking protocols are feature complete once they've added this functionality, and then they can start ossifying and removing DAO levers or DAO upgradability or anything like that. And the other really, really big nightmare scenario is that there's a bug with the ETH2 beacon chain deposit contract. Because that's I don't know how you come back from that.
We're fucked.
We're almost done. Let me throw in one more last audience question. Will eigenlayer add to the risk? I mean, there's already risk. Is eigenlayer useful or is it unnecessary risk? Just anyone who has an opinion on this.
I think we're in a bit of a same situation as with MEV Boost. It is something that at a consensus level, there's no way to do PBS yet. Therefore, we had MEV Boost that came out from an external group to cover a need that makes, arguably, it makes something that I think MEV is a bug, not a feature, and we should be working towards eliminating, but it is impossible as of now. Therefore, MEV Boost was made to supply or to provide for this sort of problem, and I think it's overall very positive because it allows solo stakers to access MEV revenue that otherwise nobody would trust them with because they could just run away with the MEV opportunities themselves, right? So overall effect, very positive, but it is not a consensus. It is not something that the Ethereum community has decided that this is how Ethereum wants to go. And it did have a bug a few months ago or a few weeks ago, and it screwed up the network for a while. Eigenlayer, we are in the same risk. It's something that's outside of the protocol. It's something that we haven't decided. It's something that we're just introducing into our kitchens, and it might break. And there is a big risk. But is it necessary? Is it positive? Yes, just like MEV Boost. It's doing something positive that people want, but it is a huge risk.
I'm afraid the panel is done, and it only now starts getting spicy. So what I suggest that you guys, you talk to the speakers afterwards. There are so many things that we couldn't discuss, like economic pressure to centralize the influence of MEV, the influence of the network effect of staking tokens. But there's a whole weekend to discuss that, and I want to thank you speakers, and I want to thank you audience, and have a good conference in Hackathon.
Amazing.